I texted the family group chat. My graduation's on Saturday. Hope you can make it. My brother replied, We'll be in Vegas, maybe next time. My mom added, Don't make this about you. I simply wrote, Understood. What they saw on the news that night made Vegas the last thing on their minds. The collapsed hotel, the rising death toll, the frantic emergency response. Suddenly, my graduation didn't matter anymore, not even to me. The text message exchange with my family was just another reminder of where I stood in their hierarchy of importance. I, Bryant Mason, had always been the afterthought in our family of 4. My older brother Jackson was the golden child, the star quarterback who earned a full athletic scholarship to a prestigious university. My mother Amanda lived vicariously through his achievements, while my father William simply went along with whatever kept the peace. I stared at my phone, reading the dismissive messages for the 20th time that evening. My graduation from college with a pre-law degree, summa cum laude no less, was apparently less important than their impromptu trip to Vegas. It stung more than I wanted to admit. My tiny apartment felt suffocating as I tossed my phone onto my worn couch. 4 years of working 2 jobs while maintaining a perfect GPA. And for what? An empty seat in the audience where my family should be. The irony wasn't lost on me. I had pursued law precisely because I wanted to make them proud, to finally earn the validation I had been seeking my entire life. Growing up in our middle-class suburban home in Connecticut, I learned early that academic achievements didn't earn the same celebration as athletic ones. When Jackson won football games, we had family dinners at restaurants. When I won the state debate championship, I got a hurried good job before the conversation turned back to Jackson. My phone buzzed again. I picked it up, hoping against hope that maybe they had changed their minds. Instead, it was an Instagram notification. I opened it to see my cousin Allie posting pictures with the caption, Vegas bound with the whole fam. Annual Mason family reunion starting early this year. My heart sank as I scrolled through the photos. There was my brother, my parents, my grandparents, my aunts, uncles, and all my cousins. Everyone was going to Vegas. Everyone except me. They hadn't even told me about the family reunion. I called my mom immediately, my hands shaking with a mixture of hurt and anger. Hello? She answered. Airport announcements audible in the background. Mom, why didn't you tell me about the family reunion in Vegas? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. Oh, Bryant, it was last minute. We didn't think you'd be able to make it with your graduation and all. You didn't think to ask me? To even let me know? Don't start this now, Bryant. We're about to board. I need to go. But Mom, not everything is about you, Bryant. We'll talk when we get back. The line went dead. I sat on my couch in stunned silence, tears streaming down my face. Not only was my family missing my graduation, but they were also having a family reunion without me. The two weren't mutually exclusive. They could have planned the reunion for after my graduation. They could have included me. They simply chose not to. My roommate Tara came home to find me crying on the couch. Hey, what's wrong? She asked, dropping her nursing textbooks on the counter and rushing to my side. My family, I managed between sobs. They're all going to Vegas for a family reunion during my graduation, and they didn't even tell me about it. Tara put her arm around me. I'm so sorry, Bryant. That's awful. Am I really that unimportant to them? I asked, more to myself than to her. No, they're just being incredibly thoughtless, Tara said firmly. Your accomplishments matter, and I'll be there cheering the loudest when you walk across that stage on Saturday. I wiped my eyes. Thanks, Tara. Have you eaten? I can make us some pasta. I shook my head. I'm not hungry. Tara squeezed my shoulder and went to the kitchen anyway. I knew she would make food and insist I eat something. That was Tara, always taking care of everyone around her. I picked up my phone again and opened Facebook. More photos of my family at the airport appeared in my feed. They all looked so happy, so excited for their trip. There was Jackson with his arm around our father. There was my mother with her sisters. Everyone smiling, everyone together, everyone but me. The realization hit me like a physical blow. This wasn't a new pattern. This was my entire life. Always on the outside, always left behind, always an afterthought. No matter what I achieved, no matter how hard I worked, I would never be enough for them. I put my phone down and walked to the window, looking out at the campus I would soon leave behind. 4 years of hard work, of proving myself, of building a future, and the people who should care the most couldn't be bothered to show up. Well, I whispered to myself, I guess I'll have to be enough for myself. Little did I know that within 24 hours, everything would change. Their Vegas trip would turn into something none of us could have imagined, and my graduation would indeed be the last thing on any of our minds. Friday morning dawned bright and clear, a perfect late spring day. My graduation was scheduled for tomorrow, and I had one final task before the ceremony, picking up my cap and gown. The campus was buzzing with excitement, students taking graduation photos with friends and family who had arrived early for the celebrations. I walked into the student center, trying to ignore the families surrounding me. Parents beaming with pride, siblings teasing and congratulating in equal measure. I kept my eyes forward, focused on just getting what I needed and getting out. "Name?" asked the volunteer at the distribution table. "Bryant Mason," I replied. She shuffled through the boxes and pulled out a package. "Here you go. Summa cum laude. Very impressive," she said, handing me the cap and gown along with the gold honor cords. "Thanks," I muttered, turning away quickly before she could ask about my plans or family. As I headed toward the exit, I heard someone call my name. I turned to see Professor Jenkins, my constitutional law professor and academic advisor. "Bryant, just the person I wanted to see," he said, walking over with a warm smile. "Hi, Professor Jenkins," I said, attempting to return the smile. He must have noticed something was off, because his expression changed. "Everything all right? You should be on top of the world right now." I shrugged. "Just a lot on my mind." "Understandable. It's a big transition. But you should be proud, Bryant. You've done exceptional work here. The law school at Georgetown is lucky to have you joining them in the fall." "Thank you," I said, genuinely touched by his words. "Will your family be arriving today for the ceremony tomorrow?" The question was like a knife to the heart. "No," I said simply, not wanting to elaborate. Professor Jenkins seemed to understand there was more to the story. "Well, the faculty will be there cheering you on. You've impressed a lot of people here, myself included." "That means a lot," I said quietly. "Listen, I know you're headed to Georgetown, but I want you to know that if you ever need a recommendation or just advice, my door is always open. Students like you are why I teach." For the first time that day, I felt a genuine smile form. "Thank you, Professor. Really." We said our goodbyes, and I headed back to my apartment, the cap and gown feeling heavier than they should have. When I arrived, Tara was setting up decorations for a small graduation party she had planned for just the two of us. "What do you think?" she asked, gesturing to the congratulations grad banner and balloons in our university colors. "It's perfect," I said, touched by her thoughtfulness. "You didn't have to do all this." "Of course I did. We're celebrating you tonight. Your mom texted, by the way. She asked if I would take pictures at the ceremony and send them to her." My jaw clenched. "She did, huh? Nice of her to think of that." Tara gave me a sympathetic look but didn't push the subject. "I made dinner reservations at that Italian place you like for 7, and Sarah and James want to join us if that's okay." "That sounds nice," I said, setting my cap and gown on the kitchen table. "I'm going to take a shower and get ready." As the warm water washed over me, I allowed myself a moment of self-pity. Tomorrow should have been one of the happiest days of my life. Instead, it felt hollow, incomplete. The thought of walking across that stage without seeing my family in the audience made my stomach knot. 4 years of sacrifice and hard work, and the people who should care the most couldn't be bothered to show up. After dinner with my friends, we returned to the apartment to watch a movie. It was nearly 11 when the breaking news alert interrupted our film. The four of us sat in stunned silence as the news anchor reported on a major hotel collapse in Las Vegas. The Grandeur, a 50-story luxury hotel and casino on the Strip, had suffered what appeared to be a structural failure in one of its towers. First responders were on the scene, but early reports indicated numerous casualties and many more injured. "Isn't that where your family is staying?" Tara asked, her voice barely above a whisper. I nodded, suddenly unable to speak. My hands trembled as I reached for my phone and dialed my mother's number. It went straight to voicemail. I tried my father, then Jackson. Nothing. "They're probably just somewhere with bad reception," Sarah suggested, trying to sound reassuring. I nodded again, not trusting my voice. I kept my eyes fixed on the television as more footage came in. The destruction was catastrophic. The north tower of the hotel had partially collapsed, floors pancaking onto one another, windows blown out, debris scattered across the famous Las Vegas Strip. The news showed aerial footage of the hotel, and my blood ran cold. I recognized it immediately. It was definitely the Grandeur, where my family was staying. The North Tower, now a broken shell of concrete and steel, was where their rooms would have been. "I need to go there," I said, standing up abruptly. "Bryant, wait," Tara said, grabbing my arm. "It's chaos right now. You won't be able to get anywhere near the hotel." "I need to find out if they're okay," I insisted, already pulling out my laptop to book a flight. James, always the practical one, spoke up. "First, let's try calling the hospitals in the area. They'll be taking in the injured." For the next 2 hours, we called every hospital in Las Vegas, asking about the Mason family. No one could give us any information. Either they hadn't been brought in, or the hospitals were too overwhelmed to check their records. I was in the middle of booking a flight to Las Vegas when the news showed another aerial shot of the hotel. This time, they zoomed in on the collapsed section, and I spotted something that made my heart stop. On one of the intact balconies adjacent to the collapse, a familiar blue suitcase was visible. My brother's distinctive luggage with the university logo sticker on the side. There was no doubt in my mind. My family had been in the North Tower when it collapsed. "I have to go," I said, confirming the flight booking. "My graduation's tomorrow, but I don't care. They're there, and they might be hurt or worse." "I'm coming with you," Tara said firmly. I looked at my best friend, tears in my eyes. "You don't have to do that." "Yes, I do. You shouldn't be alone right now." In that moment, with my heart pounding in my chest and fear threatening to overwhelm me, I realized how quickly priorities could shift. Just hours ago, I had been upset about my family missing my graduation. Now, I was terrified I might never see them again. The red-eye flight to Las Vegas was a blur of anxiety and fear. Tara sat beside me, occasionally squeezing my hand when she noticed I was spiraling into worst-case scenarios. My phone remained clutched in my other hand. Notifications turned to maximum volume in case anyone from my family called. As soon as we touched down at McCarran International Airport at 4:30 in the morning, I turned my phone off airplane mode, hoping for messages. There were none from my family, but there were dozens from friends and extended family members asking if I had heard anything. "Nothing yet," I replied to my Aunt Julie, my father's sister who lived in Oregon and hadn't gone on the trip. The airport was chaotic, filled with people like me, rushing to find loved ones who had been at the Grandeur. Emergency services had set up a crisis center in one of the terminals. Tara and I headed there immediately. The crisis center was a scene of controlled chaos. Red Cross volunteers manned tables with laptops, taking down information from distraught family members. A board on one wall displayed the names of confirmed survivors who had been taken to various hospitals. Another smaller board listed confirmed casualties, though thankfully it had fewer names. I scanned both boards quickly. No Masons listed on either one. We waited in line for nearly an hour before reaching a volunteer. "I'm looking for my family," I said, my voice surprisingly steady given the circumstances. Amanda, William, and Jackson Mason. They were staying at the Grandeur, North Tower. The volunteer, a middle-aged woman with kind eyes, typed the names into her computer. "I don't have them listed as confirmed in any hospitals yet, but that doesn't mean anything. Information is still coming in." "What room were they in?" "I don't know exactly," I admitted, "but they would have been in the North Tower." She nodded sympathetically. "The best thing to do is check with each hospital. I can give you a list of where victims are being taken. Also, leave your contact information here, and we'll call if we get any updates." I filled out a form with my information and took the list of hospitals. There were 7 facilities taking in victims from the collapse. Tara and I split up to cover more ground, each taking a ride share to different hospitals. I started with University Medical Center, the largest trauma center in Nevada. The emergency department was overwhelmed, medical personnel rushing between beds, many of which were set up in hallways due to the overflow. I approached the triage desk, where a harried-looking nurse was coordinating care. "Excuse me, I'm looking for my family. They were at the Grandeur when it collapsed. Mason, Amanda, William, and Jackson." The nurse barely looked up from her computer. "Check with patient services. Down the hall, to the right." I followed her directions and found myself in another line of worried people seeking information. When I finally reached the front, I repeated my question to the clerk. "Let me check," she said, typing into her computer. After what felt like an eternity, she looked up. "We have a Jackson Mason in the ICU. Are you immediate family?" "Yes, I'm his sister," I said, my heart racing. "Is he okay?" "What about my parents?" "I don't have any information on Amanda or William Mason. As for Jackson's condition, you'll need to speak with the doctors in the ICU." She gave me a visitor badge and directions to the intensive care unit. As I rode the elevator up, I called Tara. "They have Jackson at University Medical," I told her when she answered. "No word on Mom and Dad yet." "That's something at least," Tara said. "I'll keep checking the other hospitals. Let me know how Jackson is doing." The ICU was another scene of controlled chaos. I identified myself to the charge nurse, who directed me to a doctor reviewing charts at the nurse's station. "Dr. Rivera? This is Bryant Mason, Jackson Mason's sister." The doctor looked up, fatigue evident in her eyes. "Miss Mason, I'm glad you're here. Your brother was brought in about 6 hours ago with multiple trauma injuries from the collapse." "How bad is it?" I asked, bracing myself for the answer. "He has a severe concussion, 3 broken ribs, a collapsed lung, and a fractured femur. We've stabilized him and performed surgery to reinflate the lung and set the leg. He's heavily sedated right now. Is he going to be okay?" "His condition is serious but stable. The next 24 hours will be critical, but he's young and strong. That works in his favor." "Can I see him?" Dr. Rivera nodded. "Briefly. He won't be conscious, but sometimes familiar voices can help even when patients are sedated." She led me to a glass-enclosed room where my brother lay connected to numerous machines. His face was bruised and swollen, a ventilator tube protruding from his mouth. His right leg was elevated and wrapped in a cast. He looked nothing like the confident, vibrant brother I knew. I approached the bed cautiously, as if afraid I might somehow hurt him more. "Jackson," I whispered, taking his hand gently. "It's Bryant. I'm here now." His hand felt limp in mine. No response to my touch or voice. A lump formed in my throat as I looked at him, so vulnerable and broken. "I don't know where Mom and Dad are yet," I continued, my voice cracking. "But I'm going to find them, I promise. You just focus on getting better." A nurse came in to check his vitals, and I stepped back to give her room. "Are you the medical contact for him?" she asked. I guess I am now, I replied, realizing I was the only family member present. The doctor will need you to sign some consent forms for additional procedures, she explained, and we'll need insurance information. The practical matters momentarily distracted me from my worry. I spent the next hour providing all the information I could, signing forms, and speaking with the hospital's social worker about my brother's care. As I was finishing up with the social worker, my phone rang. It was Tara. "Bryant, I think I found your dad," she said without preamble. "Sunrise Hospital has a William Mason who was brought in early this morning. They couldn't tell me his condition over the phone, but he's there." "I'm on my way," I said, relief flooding through me. "Can you stay with Jackson? He's in room 412 of the ICU." "Of course. Any news about your mom?" "Nothing yet," I said, my momentary relief tempered by continued worry. "I'll keep looking after I check on Dad." I took another ride-share to Sunrise Hospital, about 20 minutes away. The scene there was similar to University Medical, though slightly less chaotic. After identifying myself and providing ID, I was directed to the surgical recovery floor. A nurse led me to my father's room. Unlike Jackson, he was not in intensive care, which I hoped was a good sign. When I entered the room, I found him awake, though groggy. His arm was in a cast, and bandages covered much of his torso and head. "Dad," I said softly, approaching the bed. He turned toward my voice, his eyes widening slightly in recognition. "Bryant? What are you doing here? Your graduation." Tears sprang to my eyes at his words. Even now, he remembered about my graduation. "That doesn't matter right now, Dad. Are you okay? What happened?" He closed his eyes briefly, as if gathering strength. The floor just gave way. No warning. 1 minute we were in our room. The next, Jackson and your mother were in the bedroom. I was in the sitting area. When it collapsed, we were separated. "Jackson's at University Medical," I told him. "He's pretty banged up but stable. I haven't found Mom yet." Fear flashed across his face. "They haven't found her?" "Not yet," I said, trying to sound more confident than I felt. "But I will." "What floor were you on? What room number?" 23rd floor. Room 2315. I nodded, making a mental note. "What about the others? Grandma and Grandpa? The aunts and uncles?" "Different tower," my father said, relief evident in his voice. "South Tower. They should be fine." That explained why I hadn't heard from them. They were probably dealing with evacuation and the chaos of the situation. "I need to find Mom," I said, squeezing his hand. "Will you be okay here for now?" He nodded weakly. "Go. Find her." As I turned to leave, he called out, "Bryant." I looked back at him. "Yes, Dad? I'm sorry about your graduation." The simple apology, offered in the midst of so much pain and fear, brought fresh tears to my eyes. "It's okay, Dad. This is where I need to be now." I left the hospital with a renewed sense of purpose. I had found my brother and father. Now I needed to find my mother. As I stepped outside, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "This is Howard Chen with Las Vegas Emergency Management. We recovered a phone belonging to Amanda Mason. It lists you as an emergency contact. Please call this number as soon as possible regarding victim search and recovery at the Grandeur." My hands shook as I dialed the number. My mother was still missing, and now emergency services were contacting me about victim search and recovery. The implications made my heart race with fear. "This is Bryant Mason," I said when the call connected, fighting to keep my voice steady. "Miss Mason, this is Howard Chen with Emergency Management," a calm voice replied. "We're coordinating the search and rescue operations at the Grandeur. You found my mother's phone? Does that mean you found her?" "Not yet," Howard said, his voice gentle but direct. "We recovered a number of personal items from the 23rd floor, which was one of the most severely affected. Her phone was among them." My breath caught in my throat. "What does that mean? Is she?" "We don't know yet," Howard interrupted quickly. Our teams are still working through the debris. The fact that we found her phone doesn't necessarily indicate anything about her status. Can you tell me anything that might help our search? Was she wearing any distinctive clothing or jewelry? Any medical conditions we should be aware of? I tried to think, but realized I had no idea what my mother would have been wearing. She always wears her wedding ring and a silver bracelet with her children's birthstones. She has a heart condition, mild arrhythmia. She takes medication for it. That's helpful information, Howard said. Is there any chance you could come to the command center? We're set up about a block from the grandeur. Having family members available for identification can be valuable in these situations. I'll be there as soon as I can, I promised, already moving toward the hospital exit. Before heading to the command center, I made a quick stop back at University Medical to check on Jackson and update Tara. My brother remained unconscious but stable. Tara agreed to stay with him while I continued the search for my mother. The command center turned out to be a converted convention space in a neighboring hotel. Security was tight, with police checking identification before allowing anyone inside. Once admitted, I was directed to Howard Chen, a serious-looking man in his 40s wearing an emergency management vest. "Miss Mason," he greeted me, extending his hand. "I wish we were meeting under better circumstances." "Thank you for contacting me," I said. "Have there been any updates?" "Not specifically about your mother, but I can brief you on the overall situation," he offered, leading me to a quieter corner of the bustling command center. He showed me a structural diagram of the hotel, indicating where the collapse had occurred. "The failure appears to have originated somewhere between the 20th and 25th floors in the North Tower," he explained. "From what we can determine, there was a progressive collapse that affected approximately 1/3 of the tower. My parents' room was 2315, I told him. He marked it on the diagram. That would put them near the center of the collapse zone. The good news is that we've been finding survivors in void spaces created by the way the structure pancaked. Some areas remained relatively intact. So there's still hope," I said, clinging to that possibility. "Absolutely," Howard confirmed. "Our teams are working around the clock. The first 48 hours are critical in these situations." As we spoke, a commotion near the entrance caught our attention. A group of men in expensive suits had entered and were speaking to the officers in charge. Their body language suggested they weren't emergency personnel. "Who are they?" I asked Howard. His expression darkened. "Representatives from Cascade Hotels, the corporation that owns the grandeur. They arrived a few hours ago." "What do they want?" "To manage the situation, I imagine," Howard said carefully. "These incidents can have significant legal and financial implications." The thought that corporate executives were already on scene, presumably to protect their interests while people were still trapped in the rubble, made my blood boil. But I pushed that anger aside. Finding my mother was the priority. Howard introduced me to the team coordinating the search of the 23rd floor. They took detailed information about my mother and promised to contact me immediately with any news. He also showed me where I could wait, a designated area for families with coffee, food, and cots for those who needed rest. As I sat with a cup of untouched coffee, scrolling through news reports on my phone, I noticed that details about the collapse were starting to emerge. Several construction workers who had done renovations on the hotel in the past year were speaking anonymously to the press, suggesting that corners had been cut during recent structural upgrades. My legal training kicked in as I read the reports. If these allegations were true, this wasn't just a tragedy, it was negligence. People, including possibly my own mother, had been put at risk because a corporation prioritized profits over safety. Hours passed with no news. I alternated between the command center and visits to check on my father and brother. By late afternoon, I was exhausted, running on nothing but adrenaline and fear. I had just returned to the command center when Howard approached, his expression serious. "We've located a woman matching your mother's description," he said. "She's being transported to Desert Springs Hospital now. It's about 15 minutes from here." Is she alive? I asked, afraid to hear the answer. Yes, but that's all I know at this point. Do you need a ride to the hospital? Please, I said, gathering my things with shaking hands. During the ride to Desert Springs, I called Tara to update her. They found Mom, I told her. I don't know her condition yet, but she's alive. That's wonderful news, Tara said, relief evident in her voice. Jackson's doctors just did another assessment. They're cautiously optimistic. They've reduced his sedation slightly to see if he responds. I'll come back as soon as I can, I promised. How's Dad? I called the nurses' station at sunrise. They said he's stable and resting. When we arrived at Desert Springs, I rushed to the emergency department. After identifying myself, I was directed to a trauma bay where a team of medical personnel surrounded a gurney. It took me a moment to recognize my mother. Her face was covered in dust and blood, an oxygen mask obscuring most of her features, but it was definitely her. I approached cautiously, not wanting to interfere with the medical team's work. A doctor noticed me. Family? Yes. I'm her daughter. I confirmed. She has multiple fractures and internal bleeding. We're prepping her for surgery now. Are you aware of any allergies or medical conditions? She has a heart arrhythmia, I said, remembering to mention the medication she took. That's helpful to know, the doctor said, making a note on the chart. We'll take good care of her. Someone will come update you as soon as we know more. As they wheeled my mother toward the operating room, I caught a glimpse of her hand. Her wedding ring and silver bracelet were still there, caked with dust but intact. I took it as a good sign, a symbol of resilience in the face of disaster. While I waited for news about my mother's surgery, I found myself in the hospital's chapel. I wasn't particularly religious, but the quiet space offered a moment of peace in the midst of chaos. I sat in silence, reflecting on the events of the past 24 hours. Yesterday morning, I had been heartbroken about my family missing my graduation. Now, I was grateful just to know they were all alive. It put everything into perspective. The slights and hurts that had seemed so important suddenly felt trivial in comparison to the fear of losing them forever. My phone vibrated with an incoming call, pulling me from my thoughts. It was a number I didn't recognize. Hello? I answered cautiously. Bryant Mason? A male voice asked. This is Detective Sawyer with the Las Vegas Police Department. I understand your family was involved in the Grandeur collapse. Yes, that's right. I'm calling because we're gathering information for our investigation. We're looking into potential negligence in the construction and maintenance of the building. Would you be willing to speak with us when you have time? The mention of negligence brought back the anger I had felt earlier when seeing the corporate representatives at the command center. Absolutely, I said without hesitation. I want to help however I can. Thank you. For now, I recommend keeping any documentation related to your family's stay at the hotel. Room reservations, receipts, anything like that. It could be important evidence. After hanging up, I realized I had access to my mother's phone. It had been returned to me, along with her purse when she was admitted to the hospital. Perhaps there would be reservation details or other useful information there. I opened her phone, thankful that I knew her passcode from occasions when she had asked me to look something up for her. As I searched through her emails for hotel information, I noticed a draft message in her email app, dated the day before the collapse. It was addressed to me. Heart pounding, I opened it. Bryant, I know you're upset about us missing your graduation. I don't blame you. The truth is, I've never known how to connect with you properly. You've always been so different from me, so much like your father's side of the family. Academic, serious, determined. I was always closer to Jackson because he reminded me of myself at his age. But I want you to know that I am proud of you. So proud. I just don't know how to show it. Maybe this Vegas trip was a mistake. We'll talk when I get back. Love, Mom. Tears streamed down my face. as I read the message she had never sent. All these years, I had thought she didn't care about my achievements. But she did. She just didn't know how to express it. The discovery felt like finding a precious artifact, a glimpse into my mother's true feelings that she had been unable to share. It didn't erase years of feeling overlooked and undervalued, but it opened a door to understanding that hadn't existed before. As I sat there, holding her phone, I made a promise to myself. If, when, my mother recovered, we would have that talk she mentioned. We would find a way to bridge the gap that had always existed between us. But first, she had to survive. The hours stretched into a full day as I waited for news about my mother's surgery. I alternated between Desert Springs Hospital, where she was being operated on, and University Medical, where Jackson remained in intensive care. My father had been moved to a regular room at Sunrise and was recovering well enough that I felt comfortable focusing on my mother and brother. Tara had been an absolute rock through it all, staying with Jackson when I couldn't be there and handling calls and texts from concerned family members. My grandparents, aunts, uncles, and cousins who had been in the South Tower were all safe. They had been evacuated and were staying at another hotel, some of them making visits to see my father and Jackson when possible. It was nearly 24 hours after her surgery began when a doctor finally came to speak with me about my mother. "Miss Mason," the surgeon said, exhaustion evident in his voice and posture. "Your mother made it through surgery, but her condition remains critical. We repaired internal bleeding and set multiple fractures. The next 48 hours will be crucial." "Can I see her?" I asked. "Briefly. She's in recovery now and will be moved to intensive care shortly. She's not conscious at this point." When I entered the recovery room, the beeping of machines and the sterile hospital smell hit me immediately. My mother lay still, connected to ventilators and monitors, her body seeming small and fragile beneath the hospital sheets. I approached cautiously, taking her hand gently in mine. "Mom," I whispered, "it's Bryant. I found the message you were drafting to me. We'll have that talk when you're better, okay? But right now, you just need to fight. We all need you to come back to us." There was no response, not that I expected one. But saying the words aloud felt important, like casting a lifeline across the chasm that had always existed between us. A nurse touched my shoulder gently. "They're ready to transfer her to the ICU now. You can visit her there once she's settled." I nodded, reluctantly letting go of my mother's hand. "Take good care of her, please." "We will," the nurse promised. As I left the recovery area, I spotted a familiar face in the waiting room. Howard Chen, the emergency management official who had helped me find my mother. "Mr. Chen," I said, approaching him, "what are you doing here?" "I wanted to check on your mother's status," he said, "and to give you an update. We've completed the search of the collapse zone. Everyone has been accounted for." "Thank you for coming," I said, genuinely touched by his concern. "My mother made it through surgery, but she's still critical." Howard nodded sympathetically. "I've seen a lot of disasters in my career, but this one, the scale of it, and the fact that it might have been preventable." He shook his head. "I shouldn't say more. There's an ongoing investigation. The detective who called me mentioned potential negligence," I said, lowering my voice. "Do you know anything about that?" Howard glanced around, then spoke quietly. "Off the record, there were inspection reports from last year that flagged structural concerns in the North Tower. I don't know if the hotel addressed them properly." "That's criminal," I said, anger flaring. "People died because of that negligence. My family almost died." "I understand your anger," Howard said. "But right now, focus on your family. The investigation will proceed regardless." "Thank you for telling me," I said, processing this new information. "And thank you for all your help." After Howard left, I went to check on Jackson again. To my surprise, when I entered his ICU room, his eyes were open. "Bryant," he said, his voice weak and raspy from the ventilator that had been removed sometime during my absence. "Jackson," I breathed, rushing to his side. "You're awake. What happened?" he asked, confusion evident in his eyes. I explained about the hotel collapse as simply as I could, telling him that both our parents were alive but that Mom was in critical condition. "You found us," he said, realization dawning on his face. "You came to Vegas." "Of course I did," I replied, squeezing his hand. "You're my family." Jackson's eyes filled with tears. "I'm so sorry about your graduation. We should have been there." "It doesn't matter now," I said truthfully. "It does matter," he insisted, wincing with the effort of speaking. "We've always taken you for granted, me especially." I was saved from having to respond by the arrival of Jackson's doctor, who needed to examine him now that he was conscious. I stepped out of the room to give them privacy, my mind whirling with the unexpected apology from my brother. While I waited, I checked my phone and found several missed calls from unfamiliar numbers. One had left a voicemail, identifying himself as a representative of Cascade Hotels. He was reaching out to affected families and wanted to discuss the situation. The corporate tone of the message, so at odds with the human tragedy unfolding around us, made my jaw clench with anger. When I was allowed back into Jackson's room, he was looking more alert, though still obviously in pain. "The doctor says I'm lucky," he told me. "A few inches difference, and the beam that fell would have killed me instantly." The blunt assessment made me shudder. "Let's focus on the fact that you're going to be okay. Have you talked to Dad?" he asked. "Yes, he's doing well. Broken arm and some lacerations, but nothing life-threatening." "And Mom? You said she's critical?" I nodded, not wanting to sugarcoat the situation. "She's in the ICU at Desert Springs. She made it through surgery, but the next couple of days will be crucial." Jackson was quiet for a moment, then said something that surprised me. "You've been taking care of everything, haven't you? Making all the decisions, talking to all the doctors, coordinating between hospitals. Someone had to do it," I said with a small shrug. "But it's always you, isn't it? Taking care of things, being responsible, and we never appreciate it." His words caught me off guard. This wasn't the Jackson I knew, the golden child who had always seemed oblivious to the family dynamics that had hurt me so deeply. "I think near-death experiences tend to clarify things," I said, attempting to lighten the moment. "I'm serious, Bryant," he insisted. "I've been a terrible brother, always soaking up all the attention, never thinking about how that affected you. Jackson, you don't have to do this right now. You need to focus on getting better." "No, I need to say it while I'm thinking clearly. I'm sorry for everything, for being self-centered, for never standing up for you when Mom and Dad overlooked your achievements, for missing your graduation, for a stupid Vegas trip." I didn't know how to respond. This was the apology I had wanted for years, coming at the most unexpected time. "Thank you," I said finally. "That means a lot." Our conversation was interrupted by a text from Tara, who was at Desert Springs with my mother. "Doctors want to speak with you. Sounds important. Come when you can." "I need to go check on Mom," I told Jackson. "Tara says the doctors want to talk to me." "Go," he urged. "And Bryant, thank you for being here, for finding us." I squeezed his hand once more before leaving. The tone of Tara's text worried me. Had my mother's condition worsened? As I made my way to Desert Springs, I tried to prepare myself for bad news. When I arrived, Tara was waiting outside my mother's ICU room. "The cardiac specialist wants to speak with you," she said. "Apparently there's a complication with your mom's heart condition." The doctor, a woman named Dr. Patel, explained that my mother's heart arrhythmia had worsened under the stress of her injuries and surgery. "We need to perform an additional procedure to stabilize her heart rhythm," she said. "It's not without risk, especially given her current condition, but without it, I'm concerned about her chances of recovery." "What exactly would the procedure involve?" I asked, trying to process the medical information. Dr. Patel explained the details, outlining both the potential benefits and risks. It was a lot to take in, especially for someone with no medical background. But I was the only one who could make this decision for my mother. If this were your family member, I asked Dr. Patel, what would you do? The doctor's expression softened. If it were my mother, I would proceed with the procedure. The risks are real, but in my professional judgment, they're outweighed by the potential benefit. I nodded, taking a deep breath. Then, let's do it. What do I need to sign? As I completed the consent forms, my phone rang again. It was the same number from the Cascade Hotel's representative who had left a voicemail earlier. I ignored it, focusing on the more important matter at hand. But when it immediately rang again, I decided to answer, if only to tell them to stop calling during a family emergency. Miss Mason, a smooth voice said when I picked up. This is Thomas Larkin from Cascade Hotels. First, let me express our deepest sympathies for what your family has experienced. Thank you, I said curtly. But this isn't a good time. I understand completely, Larkin continued, undeterred. I won't take much of your time. We're reaching out to all affected families to offer immediate assistance with medical expenses and accommodations while you remain in Las Vegas. His offer seemed generous on the surface, but my legal training made me suspicious. That's thoughtful, I said carefully. Is there some kind of documentation about this offer? Of course, Larkin replied. We have a simple form that outlines the assistance package. Nothing complicated, just a standard acknowledgement that you've received aid from Cascade Hotels. There it was. Would this form happen to include any language about waiving rights to future claims against Cascade? A brief pause. There is standard liability language. Yes, it's really just a formality. Mr. Larkin, I said, my voice hardening. I'm in the middle of authorizing a potentially life-saving procedure for my mother, who is in critical condition because your company's hotel collapsed. I'm also dealing with my injured father and brother, who are in 2 other hospitals across the city. So forgive me if I'm not interested in signing away my family's rights in exchange for some immediate assistance. Miss Mason, that's not what we're asking, Larkin began, but I cut him off. I'm a law school graduate, Mr. Larkin. I understand exactly what you're asking. Please don't call me again. Any further communication should go through proper legal channels. I hung up, hands shaking with anger. The audacity of trying to get vulnerable families to sign away their rights while their loved ones were fighting for their lives was beyond comprehension. Dr. Patel, who had witnessed my side of the conversation, gave me a sympathetic look. Corporate wolves don't waste any time, do they? Apparently not, I said, signing the last consent form with a firm stroke. But neither do I. Let's focus on saving my mother. 2 days after my mother's additional heart procedure, I was sitting by her bedside when I noticed her eyelids fluttering. I leaned forward, hardly daring to hope. Mom? I whispered, taking her hand, gently. Her eyes opened slowly, confusion evident as she tried to focus on my face. Bryant? Her voice was barely audible, raspy from the breathing tube that had been removed the previous day. Yes, Mom? It's me, I said, tears of relief springing to my eyes. You're in the hospital. There was an accident at the hotel in Vegas, but you're going to be okay. Her eyes widened as memory seemed to return. William? Jackson? They're both okay, I assured her quickly. Dad has a broken arm and some cuts. Jackson has more serious injuries, but he's improving every day. You were hurt the worst. She closed her eyes briefly, as if processing this information. You came to Vegas, she said. It wasn't a question. Of course I did. As soon as I heard about the collapse, a tear slipped down her cheek. Your graduation. It doesn't matter, I said truthfully. Her hand tightened weakly around mine. It does matter. I read what you wrote in my draft email. For a moment, I was confused. Then I realized she thought I had written the email I had found on her phone. Mom, I didn't write that. You did. It was a draft in your email app. Her eyes widened slightly. I never sent it. I know. I found it when I was looking for information after the collapse. She looked away, embarrassment evident on her face. I meant to send it. I just couldn't find the right words. The words were perfect, I told her, squeezing her hand. And we'll have plenty of time to talk more when you're feeling better. A nurse came in to check my mother's vitals, politely asking me to step out for a moment. In the hallway, I called my father with the good news that Mom was awake and alert. Then I updated Jackson and Tara. As I ended the last call, I noticed Detective Sawyer approaching. "Miss Mason," he greeted me. "Do you have a moment?" "Of course," I said, moving to a quiet corner of the waiting area. "Has there been a development in the investigation?" "Several, actually," he confirmed, opening a folder he was carrying. "We've obtained inspection records from the past 18 months for the Grander. There were multiple citations for structural concerns in the North Tower, specifically related to load-bearing supports that were modified during a renovation last year. Were the issues addressed?" I asked, though I suspected I already knew the answer. "Cosmetically, yes. Substantively, no," Sawyer said grimly. "The company made surface repairs but didn't address the underlying structural problems. They were given a deadline to complete proper repairs, but they applied for and received multiple extensions. So they knew the building was unsafe, and they kept it open anyway," I said, anger building in my chest. "It certainly appears that way," Sawyer agreed. "We're still gathering evidence, but I wanted you to know that we're pursuing this aggressively. Corporate negligence of this magnitude is criminal." "Thank you for telling me," I said. "Is there anything I can do to help?" "Actually, yes," Sawyer replied. "We're looking for victims and families willing to provide statements about their experiences. It would strengthen the case considerably." "I'd be happy to," I said without hesitation. "And I can probably help you connect with other families as well." Sawyer looked surprised. "You've been in contact with other victims?" "Yes," I explained. "I've met several families at the hospitals and the command center. We've started a group chat to share information and support each other." "That would be extremely helpful," Sawyer said, clearly impressed. "We're trying to build a comprehensive case, and direct testimony from those affected is powerful evidence." After Sawyer left, I returned to my mother's room. She was awake again, looking slightly stronger than before. "Who was that man you were talking to?" she asked. "A detective investigating the hotel collapse," I explained. "There's evidence that Cascade Hotels knew about structural problems, but didn't fix them properly." My mother's expression hardened. "They knew? All those people hurt and killed because they were too cheap to make repairs?" I nodded, somewhat surprised by her vehemence. My mother had never been one to express strong opinions about corporate responsibility. "It looks that way." "What can we do about it?" she asked. "The detective is building a criminal case," I told her, "and I'm sure there will be civil lawsuits as well." "Good," she said firmly. "They need to be held accountable." As we were talking, my phone buzzed with a notification from the group chat I had mentioned to Detective Sawyer. One of the other victims' family members had shared a news article about Cascade Hotel's history of safety violations at their properties across the country. It wasn't just the grandeur. It was a pattern of negligence. I showed the article to my mother, who read it with growing indignation. "This isn't just negligence," she said. "It's a business model. They know it's cheaper to pay occasional settlements than to maintain their properties properly." Her assessment was spot on, and it reminded me that before she had become a stay-at-home mother, she had worked in business administration. She understood corporate thinking better than I had given her credit for. "Mom," I said, a thought forming, "would you be willing to speak to the detective too? Your perspective could be valuable." She nodded without hesitation. "Absolutely. No one else should have to go through what our family has experienced." Over the next few days, a pattern emerged. Each morning I would visit Jackson, whose condition was improving steadily. Then I would spend time with my father, who was expected to be discharged soon. The afternoons and evenings were dedicated to my mother, whose recovery was slower but progressing well. During these hospital visits, I continued to coordinate with other affected families through our growing group chat. What had started as a way to share updates and support had evolved into something more purposeful. We were now exchanging information about Cascade Hotel's response, comparing notes on settlement offers that had been made, and discussing the ongoing investigation. It was during one of these exchanges that I learned something disturbing. Several families had already signed the forms that Thomas Larkin had tried to get me to sign, unaware that they were waiving their rights to future claims. They had been vulnerable and focused on their loved ones, easy targets for corporate manipulation. I was discussing this with my mother when there was a knock at her hospital room door. A nurse entered with a flower arrangement. "These just came for you, Mrs. Mason," she said, placing the vase on the bedside table. My mother thanked her, then reached for the card. Her expression darkened as she read it. "It's from Cascade Hotels," she said, handing it to me. "Wishing you a speedy recovery." "The nerve," I muttered, reading the message. It was signed by Thomas Larkin himself. "It's a tactic," my mother said shrewdly. "Send flowers, express concern, appear human and caring. Make it harder for people to stay angry." "It won't work on us," I assured her. "No," she agreed, "but it probably works on many people." That evening, as I was preparing to leave the hospital, my phone rang. It was Dean Rodriguez from my university. "Bryant," he said when I answered, "I've been trying to reach you for days. I just heard about what happened to your family. I'm so sorry." "Thank you, Dean Rodriguez," I said, genuinely touched by his concern. "It's been a challenging time." "I can only imagine," he said sympathetically. "The reason I'm calling, besides checking on you, is to discuss your graduation. We would like to hold a special ceremony for you, once your family has recovered enough to attend." His offer caught me completely off guard. "A special ceremony? Just for me?" "Yes," the dean confirmed. "You've been an exceptional student, Bryant, one of our best. You deserve to have your moment of recognition, and your family deserves to be there to see it." Tears welled in my eyes. "I don't know what to say. That's incredibly generous." "It's the least we can do," Dean Rodriguez said warmly. "Just let us know when your family might be able to travel, and we'll make the arrangements. Take all the time you need." After hanging up, I sat in the hospital waiting room, overwhelmed by the dean's gesture. From feeling completely overlooked just a week ago, I now felt valued and seen in a way I had always craved. When I shared the news with my mother, she started crying. "You deserve it," she said, reaching for my hand. And this time, wild horses couldn't keep me from being there. The sincerity in her voice was unmistakable. Something had shifted in our relationship, in our entire family dynamic. The tragedy that had nearly torn us apart had somehow created space for a new kind of connection. As I drove back to the hotel where Tara and I were staying, I reflected on how much had changed in just 1 week. My graduation had come and gone without me. My family had nearly died. I had discovered strengths within myself I never knew I possessed. And somehow, in the midst of all the pain and fear, bonds that had been weak or broken were beginning to heal. I wasn't naive enough to think that everything was magically fixed. Years of feeling overlooked and undervalued couldn't be erased by one catastrophic event. But there was an opening now, a crack in the wall that had always existed between me and my family, and I was determined to keep that opening from closing again. That night, I sat down at my laptop and began to write. Not case notes or legal briefs, as I had done throughout law school, but a detailed account of everything that had happened since the hotel collapse. The facts of Cascade Hotel's negligence, the stories of the families affected, the failures of regulatory oversight that had allowed the situation to develop. It wasn't just catharsis. It was the beginning of something more. A way to channel my legal education, my personal experience, and my newfound voice into something meaningful. Something that might help prevent other families from experiencing what mine had gone through. As I wrote late into the night, I realized that in the strangest way, my family's absence from my graduation had led me directly to my true calling. Not just as a lawyer, but as an advocate for those whose voices might otherwise go unheard. 3 months after the collapse of the grandeur, I stood at a podium in the university's smaller auditorium, looking out at the audience gathered for my delayed graduation ceremony. Dean Rodriguez stood to my right, holding my diploma. To my left was Professor Jenkins, who had been so supportive throughout my time at the university. But it was the front row that held my attention. There sat my mother, in a wheelchair, still recovering from her injuries, but determined to be present. Beside her was my father, his arm out of the cast, but still bearing the scars from the collapse. Next to him was Jackson, walking with a cane, but standing straighter and stronger with each passing week. Behind them were rows of people I had never expected to see at my graduation. My grandparents, aunts, uncles, and cousins, Tara and our other friends from college. And most surprisingly, several families I had met during the crisis in Las Vegas, people who had become unexpected allies and friends through our shared experience. Bryant Mason, Dean Rodriguez announced, has demonstrated not only academic excellence throughout her time at this university, but also extraordinary courage, resilience, and compassion in the face of personal tragedy. I stepped forward to accept my diploma, the gold cords of my summa cum laude status draped around my neck. As the dean handed me the document, the audience erupted in applause. I turned to face them, overwhelmed by the moment I had once feared would feel empty. My gaze met my mother's, and I saw tears streaming down her face. But unlike the tears of pain and fear that had dominated the past months, these were tears of pride and joy. She raised her hands to applaud, wincing slightly from the effort but determined to show her support. After the ceremony, we gathered for a small reception in one of the university lounges. The dean had arranged everything, refusing to let me help with any of the planning. "This is your day," he had insisted. "Let us do this for you." As we celebrated, I found myself in conversation with Howard Chen, who had flown in from Las Vegas for the occasion. He had become an unexpected friend and mentor in the months since the collapse. "I have news," he told me, his expression serious, despite the festive atmosphere. "The criminal investigation into Cascade Hotels is moving forward. The district attorney is filing charges against 3 executives, including the CEO. "That's incredible news," I said, feeling a surge of satisfaction. "Has it been announced publicly yet?" "Not yet," Howard said, "but it will be tomorrow. I wanted you to hear it first, given everything you've done to help build the case." In the months since the collapse, I had been working closely with Detective Sawyer and the district attorney's office, providing testimony and helping to coordinate statements from other victims and their families. The victims' support group that had started as a simple chat had evolved into a formal advocacy organization, with me serving as its unofficial legal advisor. "There's something else," Howard added. "I've been speaking with some colleagues at the National Building Safety Commission. They're looking for someone with both legal training and first-hand experience with structural failure incidents to join their policy team. I recommended you." "Me?" I said, surprised. "But I just graduated. I don't have any practical experience yet." "You have more relevant experience than most people with decades in the field," Howard countered. "And your legal education combined with your personal connection to the issue makes you uniquely qualified. Think about it. They'll be in touch formally next week." As Howard moved away to speak with my father, my mother wheeled herself over to me. "What was that about?" she asked, a knowing look in her eye. "You look like someone just offered you your dream job." I smiled, still processing Howard's news. "Something like that. The National Building Safety Commission might want me to join their policy team." "Of course they do," my mother said with surprising confidence. "You've been more effective in 3 months than most people are in a lifetime." Her words warmed me in a way I hadn't expected. "Thanks, Mom. I mean it," she continued. "I've been watching you these past months. The way you've fought not just for our family, but for all the families affected. The way you've refused to let Cascade Hotels off the hook. The way you've turned your own pain into purpose." She reached for my hand. I've never been more proud of anyone in my life, coming from my mother, who had always been sparing with her praise where I was concerned. These words meant everything. I squeezed her hand, unable to speak past the lump in my throat. "I know we have a lot of history to work through," she added softly. "Years of me not seeing you clearly, not appreciating your gifts. I can't change the past. But I want you to know that I see you now, Bryant. I really see you." "That means a lot," I managed to say. "I found another draft email on my phone yesterday," she said, a small smile playing at her lips. "One, I wrote to your father during those first days in the hospital when I couldn't speak. I told him that if I survived, I wanted to be a better mother to you. That I wanted to make up for all the times I made you feel less important, less valued." "Mom, you don't have to." "Yes, I do," she interrupted gently. "Because here's what I've realized, Bryant. Sometimes it takes almost losing everything to see what was always right in front of you. You have been the heart of this family, all along. The one who holds us together. The one who fights for what's right, no matter the cost. The one who showed up when it mattered most." Across the room I saw Jackson watching us. He nodded slightly, as if affirming our mother's words. In the months since the collapse, my relationship with my brother had transformed as well. The old dynamics of favoritism and competition had given way to mutual respect and genuine affection. The reception continued into the evening, a celebration not just of my academic achievement, but of our family's survival and renewal. As it wound down, Dean Rodriguez approached me with one final surprise. "Bryant," he said, "I've been speaking with the admission committee at Georgetown Law. In light of your exceptional work with the victims of the Grandeur collapse, they're interested in offering you a spot in their public interest law program, with a full scholarship. It would mean deferring your enrollment by 1 year, to give you time to continue your advocacy work." The offer was unexpected and perfect. It would allow me to work with the Building Safety Commission while preparing to further my legal education in a program specifically designed for the kind of advocacy I now knew I wanted to pursue. "That's incredible," I said, genuinely moved by the opportunity. "I don't know how to thank you." "Don't thank me," the dean said warmly. "You earned this through your own merit and actions. Sometimes life takes us on unexpected detours that lead us exactly where we're meant to be." Later that night, after my family had returned to their hotel and I was alone in my old apartment, I reflected on the dean's words. The detour that had begun with that painful text exchange about my graduation had indeed led me to an unexpected destination. One where my family truly saw and valued me. One where I had discovered my purpose and voice. One where tragedy had somehow been transformed into triumph. My phone buzzed with a text from my mother. "Today was everything I always wanted for you, but didn't know how to say. Sleep well, my amazing daughter. Tomorrow is the first day of the rest of our story." I smiled at her words, feeling a sense of peace and possibility that had once seemed unimaginable. The journey had been painful, the cost nearly too high to bear, but we had emerged stronger, both individually and as a family. And I had found my calling in helping others navigate their own journeys through tragedy to transformation. As I prepared for bed, I glanced at the diploma now framed on my wall. It represented not just academic achievement, but a profound personal victory. I had wanted my family to witness my graduation, to finally acknowledge my accomplishments. Instead, they had witnessed something far more meaningful: my capacity to rise to challenges, to lead with compassion, and to fight for justice. In the end, that recognition was worth far more than any ceremony could provide. It was the foundation of a new relationship with my family, one built on genuine respect and understanding, rather than obligation or expectation. The girl who had texted her family about graduation, hoping desperately for their approval, was gone. In her place stood a woman who had discovered her own worth, who had found her voice, and who was ready to use that voice to make a difference in the world. Have you ever experienced a moment when something you thought was a rejection or disappointment turned out to be a doorway to something better? Sometimes life's detours lead us to exactly where we need to be. Please share your thoughts in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share it with someone who might need to hear this message today. Thank you for taking this journey with me, and I hope you find your own path to triumph through life's unexpected challenges.